Yo, I just wanted to make a video looking at El Volcán de Fuego. Uh, it has been extremely active tonight, um, pretty much non-stop in a way that I don't know if I've seen before, at least not in a long time, where, I mean, it just looks like one continual lava fountain. You can see, I mean, the atmosphere around it is pretty intense as far as like the clouds surrounding it, and I mean it's just even more dramatic looking. But if we go back, we'll go back like 30 minutes is what it looks like, and you can see that some of this is not even clouds exactly. It's like you know um, volcanic emissions related to the lava and molten material pouring down the side. And I mean, it's literally just been fountaining for a while now. We can go to some of the parts where it's even most intense, but I mean, this is what I mean as far as like I think this is cloud, like this little bit right here, but this other stuff coming off this side of the mountain, that's I believe related to the molten ejecta. The molten material going down the side, and it's just like this is 2 hours ago, right? Uh, let's see, 3 hours ago, 4 hours ago, 5 hours ago, 6 hours ago. This is the point where it goes from the regular daytime, um, setting to the IR setting. I think this is infrared and not thermal. But you can pretty clearly see an orange glow at the top, and lots. This is like smoke and ash coming off, and I think the only reason you don't see more impressive of an orange glow is because of the cloud coverage in front. But I think it's been doing this most of the day. It looks like. I mean, if we go back, you couldn't even see anything 12 hours ago. 10 hours ago, you could barely see, and about 10 hours ago, you could start to see. I think that's when the clouds started moving. But when you can start to see it, I mean, it just looks like it's been active. And this would be around 2, 2:42, I think. But like you can see, this is cloud, but this I think is volcanic emissions like ash and stuff. And just all day, it's just been doing this. Like I mean, pretty much it looks like at least all day. Here's a good example. Um, like it actually looks like it's maybe a little less active than it is now, because I think if what you would see now, like if now was daytime and you could see this, it would look very there'd be a clear orange glow. Let's see. There might be a moment where it just kind of puts off something here, explodes, and you can see what I'm talking about by the orange glow, just like when it originally turned from infrared to the regular color spectrum. Hmm. Also, the sunset's very impressive over Fuego. It usually is, but anyway. Um, just like you can see a slight orange glow in the middle there. I mean, but it really picks up as soon as it uh, it's IR, and I think part of it is during the day you can't really see. It might even look somewhat like this, but you can't see it as well just because of the camera. But on this, it's like it literally glows, so it's hard to miss. But even then, I do think what is going on here later in the past like 4 hours, and even more recently in the past 3 hours, because it looks like it's picked up. You know, it wasn't like this when the camera switched settings. It didn't look exactly like this. So yeah, I just wanted to look at this because I don't, like I said, I don't know if I've seen Fuego look like this constantly and consistently on this camera. I remember in 2018, in June of 2018 or May, there was, a major eruption of Fuego, and I think it affected the villages around it and the areas around it. But um, I don't think this camera was set up like this at that point. I guess I'd also like to point out, so here in the Discord, posted this up, and it's um, some links to, first of all, I have Mr. MBB here, Mr. MBB 333, and he says, seems as if something has the earth all stirred up, and volcanoes, quakes, fireballs, so fireballs meaning meteors. But he seems to be thinking, and this is something I've thought, and I also have this up here from Dutch Sense, is that there's a very clear uptick in seismic and volcanic activity. And I put here late November, early December. And you could just see it if you go through the volcano or the volcanic. I have the volcanoes section here in the Discord, in the Fringecraft Discord. But when you go up, I mean, you can clearly see uh, Mauna Loa. I mean, like Mauna Loa and Kilauea at the same time. Uh, but that Kilauea has been going on for a year. But we now have Mauna Loa joining it, um, or it might have uh, come down a little bit in activity here in the past few days. Not exactly sure the status of it, but it definitely went from not doing anything to doing something. You have Sakurajima even recently here. There's been a number of molten uh, activity events where you can literally see, explosions and volcanic lightning. Um, Semeru in Indonesia, as well as Kerinci or Kerinci in Indonesia. Stromboli in Italy. Uh, let's see. I think there's some other one. Taupo having like seismic unrest around it. Um, Cotopaxi volcano putting out emissions and ash fall over Quito. In ash fell in Quito. Um, so it. Oh, San Miguel volcano in El Salvador. There's just a lot of volcanic activity, and in the past, this was something. There are times when there's elevated volcanic activity, and the best, uh, like a time that I can remember was when, hmm, hold on, it was a volcano in Africa. Okay, this one, Mount Nyiragongo, erupted in, let's see, 2021, and affected, you know, this city of Goma as well. I mean, you could see it from space, right? And at the same time, I think La Soufriere, um, also had volcanic activity, like strong volcanic activity that produced an ashfall over the entire islands. Um, and I think Stromboli at the same time, or Etna, was going off, and a number of other volcanoes were showing activity. And when the USGS, when someone was asking, I believe it was a USGS volcanologist or geologist or something, uh, geoph- geophysicist, someone was saying like, "Oh, there's elevated activity," and like seemingly the response from the USGS, or at least how about this, like the academic world was like, "No, that's not true." There's only this many volcanoes. Let's say there's 30 volcanoes going off currently, and at any given time there's 30. But part of the reason that that's inaccurate, in the least it's disingenuous, is that you can say like, oh, technically right now Sakurajima is erupting, like it has been erupting since 2017, but right now, as you can see here, it is not at this moment erupting, right? Like you don't see stuff, ash blowing out the top, right? um but it's counted as erupting. And there's a number of submarine volcanoes and volcanoes in remote areas around the world that might have some minor eruptive activity that are considered erupting, right? And it's up to academics, or these agencies, to say whether they are actively erupting or not. They don't leave it to uh, amateurs, even though technically amateurs can say yes or no whether it is erupting or not. You can, I mean, reasonably, you can look at a camera if there's a camera pointing at it, and you could say, "Oh yeah, that's erupting," or "It's not erupting," right? Um, in a way that's prominent. And the difference between a bunch of submarine and remote volcanoes erupting, as opposed to a number of like relatively problematic eruptions around uh, populated areas, is massive, right? I mean, I can't understate this enough, that, or overstate, or whatever, that when you actually have volcanoes like affecting population zones, um, that's there is a difference than like a submarine volcano, or remote volcanoes that don't affect human populations at all, that are having minor eruptions. So to say that there's no uptick because some of them, it even seems like they could be exhibiting the same amount of activity, but they'll say like, well, that's not erupting currently, because it just helps the narrative that there's not some kind of increase in activity. And I do think there are periods where there's clearly increased. I mean, it's obvious. There are periods where there's clearly increased activity. And to say, to write some of those periods off because you don't want to cause panic, which, if it's accurate information, you should be giving it out anyway, if it's reliable, right? And part of the issue is you just, like, it's hard as a individual to like gather all the information up from all the different sources, in a way that is, can give you like the truth, right? But anyway, I just wanted to go over that because clearly to me at this moment there is an obvious uptick in volcanic activity worldwide, like, and my guess is like USGS or whatever volcanic agencies looks like, um, whatever volcanic agencies there might be, or whatever seismic agencies might say, no, because of this reason or that reason or the other. And, I think some of the times when they do that, it's illegitimate, is what I'm saying. Or it's maybe not illegitimate, but disingenuous. Um, in fact, there is a like objectively verifiable increase in activity that is, um, that through certain means is like swept under the rug. Like, oh yeah, well, you know, in fact, there's actually less activity going on now because there's only this many volcanoes going off. But it's like all the volcanoes that they name going off are near populated areas, and it's ones that they can't lie about essentially. Whereas like, you know, if a if you added on top all of the remote and remote submarine volcanoes everywhere, whatever's that are showing activity or erupting technically, which I mean, they can kind of just decide, well, we don't really consider this one to be erupting now, or you know, whatever the reason is, it's not going to be represented in the list of erupting volcanoes. And so kind of the numbers can be padded. And when there is an uptick, they can like wipe some of those eruptive activities off the board in order to, you know, maintain like the status quo that there's not an increase in activity. And so I just want to say right now, currently, like, I don't even think I've named all the like volcanoes that have shown activity, like eruptive activity in the past 2 or 3 weeks. Significant eruptive activity, or you know, some kind of eruptive event that's you know, not common. And it, my guess is that we'll continue to see some activity like this at least for the foreseeable future, right? And um, you know, I just wanted to say something about it because it's not something that I see like on the more mainstream. I don't really like this whole idea of like mainstream news and whatever, but like you don't really see it other than like coverage on news channels. You see some coverage of Mauna Loa, but like there's no, you know, even when it comes to like more mainstream kind of or academic viewpoint kind of channels, you know, there seems to be they want to underplay certain things. And again, I can understand the idea, well, we don't want to cause panic, but if that the idea is that, well, we got to hide things to not cause panic, then that's more problematic than just allowing the truth of, yeah, there's increased levels of volcanic activity going on. You only actually cause more panic when it's obvious that you're being disingenuous, right? So it shouldn't do that. Um, and you know, I don't think a lot of the agencies, I don't think they're evil, right? Or like specifically deciding to like, we need to trick people and whatever. But I do think certain decisions they make with like, you know, really no oversight. I mean, like who's gonna, they're the agency that looks over it, so who really tells them yes or no? I mean, you know, when they're called out by certain groups, you know, I've brought up at least one fringe individual, right? With Dutch sense, he's considered pretty fringe, but like reasonably. So, first of all, I want to say if you have a knife, right, the fringe of the knife is the cutting edge of the knife, right? I mean, I don't think every fringe person is necessarily on the cutting edge, right? But I do think that realistically, a lot of what is considered fringe science is just ahead of the game, right? I'm not saying pseudoscience, I'm saying certain things that are, you know, there is some scientific basis to it, and there's at least like an attempt to create a scientific uh, understanding or theory around the principles of whatever's going on. And it gets kind of pushed to the side by like mainstream academia because honestly, egos and money and all sorts of other things, if that in fact supplants some kind of other system that has already been in place that is supposedly telling you how this all works out, right? And how everything works. And the people that have invested their time and money and interests in that are then kind of left in a space where, okay, well, we're clearly not right and we've lost credibility. And so, I actually think it's important for people like Dutch Sense and, yeah, Mr. MBB333 and other YouTubers and content creators, not to create like hysteria or just say things like willy nilly, but to like really prod and probe and if there are realistic kind of scientific uh, bases for their guesses on what's going on, then I think it's actually pretty reasonable and important that they continue to do those things. And especially if they're doing it in the public eye, where you can take their mistakes and say, okay, well, here is where it doesn't work out. And I don't think it always has to work out for them to have some kind of like correct inference on things that might be overlooked by more mainstream sciences or more concrete academia, you know, kind of the mainstream and academics. So this is just something I wanted to say, and I'm not sure if I'm gonna put this on my YouTube channel. I make videos, and a lot of them just go on my hard drive, but some of them I do end up putting on the channel. So if I do put this one on the channel, which I'm thinking about it, um, I'll probably like link to, Dutch Sense and Mr. MBB333, and um, you know, I think that they're in agreement seemingly that there's an uptick regardless of whether like the mainstream agencies and academics think there is. And like I, unrelated to them, also think there is, but like seeing that they think there is, it's like, yeah, okay, obviously. And these guys looking at it all the time. I'm looking at it all the time too. You know, what is amazing is the amount of access, like, hey, I'm looking at Houston, I'm looking at New York, I'm looking at Dallas, I'm looking at New York again. I'm looking at actually let me put this like this. So we go from Texas to New York here to Israel to Seoul to Tokyo to worldwide volcanoes and earthquakes to like Mexico to Guatemala to Sakurajima, Kagoshima to whatever. I mean, I can pull up this playlist that has a ton, and I even just have a bunch here that are good. And like, there's information at everybody's fingertips that they can use, and so it's harder, I think, to like, you gotta be like, I think so. That's what I'm saying. I think there's some disingenuous points being made because certain um when it's obvious there's like a volcanic uptick and agencies or whomever that is like more mainstream in academia is saying, "Oh, there's no uptick," and trying to use some Jedi mind trick. Well, yo, I'm, I'm Yoda. First of all, yo, nice to meet you. And your Jedi mind trick isn't gonna work because I'm just thinking, right? I'm using my brain, and what it's saying is that you're being disingenuous based on what I can see with my own two eyes, and the points that I'm making, where it's like, okay, well, normally you don't have this many things going off in populated areas. And I'm not even saying that it has to be affecting the population, but again, when you can see the video of it because it's in a close enough area that it has like a camera on it, even some super remote volcanoes have cameras on them 24/7. Like, I don't think this is in a super populated area. I actually don't think many of these volcanoes are in the most populated areas. I would say maybe the only volcano that's in a hyper populated area is like Mount Fuji, maybe, but I don't have a camera on it because it's not like an active, at least not currently, volcano that I'm like looking at constantly because it's doing things right. But like a lot of these are not. Like Popo actually is. It's like in the middle of two major cities in Mexico, but other ones maybe not so much. I mean, clearly there's a population around this one, so there's multiple HD cameras, and you can actually watch it live. But others are like, okay, you get a series of pictures every 30 seconds, a minute, 5 minutes, and anyway, I believe there's an uptick in volcanic activity. Seemingly, so does Dutch Sense. So does um, Mr. MBB333. I think probably a number of other YouTube creators that I'm not going to mention by name, but I would assume that they would be noticing that there is like more volcanic activity currently too. Um, and there does seem to be some seismic activity, but there was a point where like numerous 7 magnitude earthquakes were going off all over the place earlier this year. So we aren't seeing that currently, but definitely as far as volcanic activity, I that it's very hard to like pretend that there isn't like an uptick, particularly at these like um ones that you can see with the camera. So okay, that's all I wanted to say. I'm gonna end the video here. I hope you've enjoyed. I guess if this does go on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe. Do the YouTube thing, or don't, or whatever. I don't really care. I just put these up because I want to have them for the future, I guess. So yeah, hope you enjoyed, and later. Yeah.